Looking to learn life lessons without going through the experience? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Hidden Struggles with your host, Lady C.
Hi, this is Lady C. Welcome to Hidden Struggles. In my upcoming episode, I'm featuring a guest that has been on my platform several times already, and she's going to be talking about her personal experience with parental alienation. Now, when you think about parental alienation, you may not have heard that term before, but you have certainly felt the effects. And you probably know someone, and maybe you even have been in this situation yourself. It's nothing new, the concept. It's just that throughout the years, the past several decades, psychologists have had the opportunity to do more research on this situation. And not only that, but they have also been able to discover and study the effects of what happens to children in this situation. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Ivy to the show. Ivy, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. I'm so honored.
Oh, you're so welcome. And like I said, we're doing this in like a 3-part series, and she'll be back on subsequent episodes to talk more about her life experiences in a later episode. But right now, we're just going to focus on the parent alienation. And Miss Ivy, you want to tell us all about what that means?
Well, parental alienation, what I thought was more so a legal situation, but I learned that it's not really. It's actually a psychological thing that happens to the child through manipulation. They're actually turned against the other parent or even grandparent in this case. I didn't know that was such a thing either. But going through it, I learned that not only was this situation happening in the context of a family, but also looking at the correlation of her belief system was also feeding that as well in terms of me not being good, being bad association or whatever the case may be.
Now, Miss Ivy, in talking to you about your child and this alienation process that's taking place in your life right now, you want to explain to our audience who doesn't understand your background on why your daughter thinks that you're the bad guy.
Well, coming from the Jehovah's Witness faith, you're taught heavily not to mix with the world, which is anyone outside of that organization. You're not encouraged to be around what they call bad association, either in or outside of the congregation. So, this whole concept of being judgmental of who you spend your time with is hammered into your head. And I was very devout and I taught my daughter these things. And I'm partially accountable for her thought process of looking at me like an enemy, right? Because basically it's what it equates to. And if a person's disfellowship, that term meaning shunned by the religion, then essentially they're not a servant of Jehovah. They don't have his spirit and they're with the rest of the world. So that's her view of me right now, in addition to whatever else she's being fed since I'm not around.
And something, Miss Ivy, a lot of people have that same issue that you're having. I know several people that are in the same situation that you're in, where they raised their children in this religion and they taught them how to view people who left the religion. And this is what you're going through. And so now that you've left, the indoctrination that your child was given remains, which means that you're the outsider. And so at this point, how are you coping with what's going on? How are you coping with that?
Well, I will say I'm glad that I'm not on a severe roller coaster of emotions anymore, because it was really intense for me. We've been apart now for 3 years, and the first 18 months were sheer hell. I was already in therapy, so I continued to do that. Um, I started looking into other forms of mindfulness, meditation, yoga, getting more into nature, being more intentional about my sleep habits and workout. And none of these things are perfect, right? But they are things that help me cope with it. And then when I just accepted it for what it was, I mean, living in the past is not going to do me any good. And constantly looking forward, like, oh, she'll come back to you one day, or wait till she's an adult. All daughters need their mothers. And I'm like, I don't want false hope. I've already been in a lifestyle belief system where there's false hope, is no paradise at the end of this situation. So I'm choosing to focus on the now, the moments that I have. So that helps me cope as well, and being able to love my daughter. I have a piece in a book I'm coming out with that says I had to let my daughter go so that I can have her forever. And fighting that situation was just, Lady C, it was driving me crazy, like seriously on the fringes of literally snapping mentally. So, I had no choice but to let go. And I'm glad that I did and that I'm moving forward. And I support her any way that I can. I still send her texts, I'll send her cards in the mail, little gift packages, because nothing's going to stop me from being her mother and saying I love her, but not being creative with how I can show her I love her. To me, if anything, gives me a glimmer of hope that she'll look back and see my actions and then come around to maybe at least want to have a conversation.
Now, I totally understand what you're saying because, when we spoke, like I think about a couple years ago when you were going
Mhm.
through this situation with your daughter, and I remember, just how frustrated you were. And it was really, wearing on you. But now to see you saying that I realize I got to let go shows that you're starting to heal yourself because you realize that at this point, there's nothing you can do, but you can begin to heal yourself. And just like you're saying, you're with a therapist. He's telling you what this is. He says, what is parent alienation? You know? What other things are you doing to cope with this situation?
I tell you from a ambition perspective, the different initiatives or businesses that I have going on is propelling me to be successful, right? Hashtag disfellowship success. And the theory or the belief system is that if you're disfellowship, then you're going to fail. You're going to live this crazy debauched life, and then you'll come to the realization of coming back. And I can't fit into that mode. I can't be that thing that makes those words true. So I have no choice but to keep going forward and to keep wanting to set the example for anyone who's trapped and wants to leave. You can get out and you can still be somebody. You don't have to be pigeonholed in that one spot. And just again, that mindfulness motivates me. It helps me to deal with some of the hopelessness that I struggle with at times. But that self-help books, they've been really great too. So I do a lot of reading and fiction, nonfiction now, and poetry and astrology. Like there's different things that I allow myself to learn because I also enjoy that too. So loving on myself, it helps as well. I give myself a hug because I'm
I
still
know
standing, I'm still standing and I'm still being able to be true to myself, like who I am on the inside. And that helps me out a great deal.
that's excellent. And not only that, but we're dealing with a minor child as well. And so when you think about, having a minor child, who has custody of your daughter?
On paper,
Mhm.
me.
Oh my goodness. So please explain this. Can you just explain the situation about you actually have custody of your daughter
Yes.
and she's not with you? Can you tell my listening audience what that's all about?
So I am not omnipotent, right? I feel like that's the word I might have said it incorrectly, but y'all get the point. So I can't say that I could see inside of the walls of my ex-husband's home to hear and actually see what happened, but what I gather from my daughter's action and how the situation unfolded is what I'm about to share. So initially at our divorce, I showed sympathy for him being unemployed and at that time indigent. So I didn't like make the divorce process complicated. I wanted to be rid of him. It was 17 years of abuse. I'm sure you guys can understand. You just wanted to be out. So my daughter stayed with me and I had custody because he claimed he had nowhere to stay, which was fine. Visitation was allowed, and so I was picking her up, every other, trying to do that. And I thought he was getting himself together because he wanted a home for him and his daughter, things of that nature. And that's when I found out that he had remarried. So the reason why that's a relevant piece of information is because my daughter was visiting with her father and she was coming back home and she never told me. She never told me that he was married. And when I finally got that out of her, 6 months had passed because she chose not to come back from his house and she was visiting. And since she had been there, if I wanted to get her, I needed to bring the police there or I needed to go back to court and hire an attorney for me and also get an attorney for her, which is called a guardian ad litem. So I'm pretty sure you now see the dollars just racking up, racking up. And it's not like she's minor, like 6 or 7, she's 13. So she can talk back, she can ingest what's being said to her and spew it out. So that's what she started doing. I started hearing her say things like, I don't remember that happening when I would try to explain myself to her. Or, well, that's not what I heard. So she started with this really strong deniability of my side of the story. And that's kind of what let me know something is happening because my child is not talking like my child. She's starting to sound like she's being fed things. So from there, I started advocating for her to go back to therapy because she had been with me in therapy for the prior 2 years. So when I start pushing for therapy, all of a sudden her father is like, well, I can't make her go to therapy. She doesn't want to go. That was the second thing that let me know something is up because you shouldn't have a problem with your child going to therapy, especially given them coming off of a divorce, me being disfellowshipped, right? And just everything else that comes with that, her have been bullied in school, like you're seeing signs of anxiety and depression in your child. Why would you not want to make her go to therapy? Now, mind you, by this time, I'm consulting with attorneys. I'm doing all this stuff to try to get at least the retainer fee together, which down here, your average retainer fee is like 4 grand. So in the state of Florida, there are those fees or that process. I can't say that that's what it's like in any other state just to get an attorney, but that process was very challenging. So what I did was I filed a complaint, like almost like a restraining order, right? This is the process I had to go through here. So I had to file a restraining order. Then from there, I had to go to the police and tell them I wanted to have my daughter removed from the premises. I brought my divorce decree that said I was her residential parent. So that's where the cops looked at that. They went, drove to the house. I was able to follow. They knocked on the door. And literally, I see my ex-husband, I see my daughter, and then I see his new wife, which, mind you, I was never allowed to meet the new wife. That was another red flag. And my daughter standing there in the doorway, and I'm like really like, yeah, give me my kid back. And the police officers, they walked down the driveway pretty much and told me like, "Yeah, we can't take her." And I'm like, "Why not?" And they're like, "She's saying she doesn't want to leave and she doesn't want to be with you. And that you always overreact and that you're unstable."
So
So I
she
had
took.
to gather myself
Oh my God.
and drive away without my child, and that's what broke me. So that probably happened in like November of 2022. And when 2023 came, I had to like pretty much take 2 leaves of absence from work. Like I, I could not. So that really last year was my journey to healing, which has led me to where I'm at right now.
Oh man, I am so sorry to hear that. I can just feel your frustration, and to know that, you've always had your daughter in your custody, right?
Yep.
And then just to have her ripped away from you overnight. Not only that, but for her to say it out of her own mouth that she didn't want to be with you. And at the
Yeah.
same time, here you are realizing that he's remarried, and now so it's like some other woman has taken your place, you
Yeah.
know, for your child, you
Yeah.
know. So how long did it take you to get over that?
I
Well, you're
won't
still
say
going
I
through it. You're
got
probably still
I
going through
don't
it,
I
right?
listen, I'm very meticulous with words at times, and I wouldn't say that I've ever or will ever get over it. However, I'm able to accept it and move beyond it, right? I feel like it's always going to be a small void in me because what parent, you know what I mean? It's a loss. So of course in the beginning it's going to be really raw and intense, but hopefully in time it calms down a little bit, but you never forget. That's why you can't get over it, right? That's kind of like a little, you know. So you just have to constantly work at it. You do. And then you have to accept that that's just a part of life. You just didn't anticipate it happening to you.
Exactly. Well, now that your husband has the custody, I know
Oh, and
you
he
had
doesn't
mentioned.
have custody because he
Oh,
will
I'm
not
sorry.
take me back to court.
Oh, I shouldn't. Let me back. I'm gonna cut that. Now that your husband has convinced your daughter not to want to leave, and it's going to cost you all this money to get her back, and now she's older. Are you required to pay him child support?
No, no.
Okay.
So the reason why is because he doesn't legally have custody of her. So we would have to go through a whole custody and visitation battle just for him to establish custody at that time, which also means that now his financials are going to be on paper and so will his new wife's. So that's a can of worms he doesn't want to open. And the reason why I know that is because when I was his wife, I was also a stepmother of two. And so I've gone through that nasty process of what it looks like to have something like that happen, and he doesn't want that smoke.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he
But
gets the
the
best of
ter-
both.
but
Well, I'm not gonna say he gets the best of both worlds, because the best of both worlds would be for him to have custody and you pay child support. You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
So
Yeah.
that's what my last attorney, he said, yeah, leave it be. He said, just leave it be. He said, how old is the kid? And I told him, I said, well, and he said, yeah, she about to be grown. Leave it be.
And you know what? Here's the thing. I'm gonna tell you what makes your situation so terrible is the fact that under normal circumstances, a child would not want to not be with their other parent just because they left a religion. I mean,
Right.
because when you think about it, you got two things going on. Really, you got one. And the one thing is you no longer want to be part of the Jehovah's Witness religion. And according to this religion, when you leave, you're the one that's the wrong one. You're the one that left God. You're the one that we can't talk to anymore.
Sinned. You sinned. You're soiled now.
Yeah. And so,
You're
because
no
I mean,
longer a saint.
exactly. Can you imagine being a Catholic or a Baptist or something like that, and the parents are no longer together? Well, the other parent would not tell the child that the person that left the religion is no longer serving God, or no longer, approved to associate with, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because these other
Yeah.
religions, that just goes to show the power of a cult. Because these other religions do not teach their members that if somebody leaves their church, that they left God. And
Right.
so that's really what you're dealing with here. I mean, when you talk to your psychologist, did you ask him if he's ever seen this in other religions before?
I don't know if I asked him that direct question. Um, but it is more prevalent in religions that shun people. Um, which we know not only do cults shun, but there are other religions mainstream that shun as well. As a matter of fact, Catholics shun.
Well,
So
yeah, well,
yeah, but there's varying degrees, right? But it's still certain members who are super orthodox with that religion. They will abide by that and not deal with you, right?
that would be my grandmother, but she didn't really shun. Trust me.
Yeah.
Like, but, because
Right.
when my grandmother was going to be a nun, she was in the convent for 9 years, and
Ooh.
she ended up leaving the convent and got married, so she never really became a nun. But
Oh, okay.
she was totally immersed in that religion, where she even wore her habit at night. This is after she got married and had
Oh.
5 kids. My grandmother was totally in this religion, and none of her children practiced after they left home.
Oh,
So, and she was not shunning nobody. But the way it
what?
is they can't go and take communion if they're not in the church. So, like
Mm.
when my aunt went to her mother's funeral and they did communion, she didn't go take the communion. So
Oh,
I mean, at one point, I'm sure they did shun, and in fact,
right.
throughout history, you will know that the Catholics not only shunned, but you were put to death. Okay, so bottom line is, I mean, nobody wants to go visit that part of history, right? But the bottom line is, nobody does shunning like Jehovah's Witnesses. I've talked to so
Facts.
many different people, but don't nobody shun like those folks. You know,
You said they
I
just
mean,
over the top, like,
when you see shun in the dictionary, Jehovah's Witnesses is right is the caption right up under there. Because they
yes,
do a good job. I mean, they do a thorough good job of shunning.
they do. But you
You
know
know,
what? The reason why I think that point that you make is why you can't just say if it's prevalent in one more so than the other, right? Because to a certain degree, it happens. And it can happen for money reasons too. Let's think about it. That somebody could want to harbor the child because they want more money in child support, right? But it's over like 22 million people who experience this in the United States. And 10 million of them are adults that had extreme alienation cases. So it happens to a lot of parents and grandparents.
absolutely. And I'm saying that, like I mean, and so we realize that there's not that many Jehovah's Witnesses in this country. And with the number of Jehovah's Witnesses that are in this country, they're probably not going to the therapist talking about it. So of course, like you're saying, other people are experiencing it as well. And I think what you're saying is true too. It's the money thing, because when you put money into the equation, all
Yeah.
bets are off.
And this
You
is
know,
post-pandemic too, at least in my situation. So, you know, that was really difficult.
hmm it's really rough. But I mean, I grew up with kids that thought their parents or the other parent that left didn't want them. All to the tune
Mm,
of they didn't realize that their parents was lying to them about why the father wasn't there. Now, throughout history, it's always the man that gets this label of leaving and abandoning the family.
right.
Because I mean, you heard the song "Papa Was a Rolling Stone" by the Temptations, right? So
Yes.
wherever he laid his hat was his home, right? So the
Right.
man got that label. And so, if you were talking to a school, a classmate or something, a lot of times you would be thinking, if their father left, everybody knew he had another woman. He
Right.
left. He left the wife. She was the faithful one, but he left because he was Papa was a Rolling Stone, right? So
Right.
that just became the natural way to look at things, and kids they just accepted that.
Right.
But, when you find out, when you start digging down, double clicking on other things, sometimes you find out that some of these men were not as deadbeat as they were left out to be,
Right.
as they were trying to make them out to be, you know. So
Exactly. I've seen
that's
those
just the way it is.
examples too.
Mhm. Right. I mean, it's complicated, as they would say, you know. But there's a
Facts.
lot of guys. I mean, there's a lot of men that want to take care of their children. And I don't know if you heard about the case with what's his name, the rapper? I think it was Ludacris. And when
No.
you talk, okay, okay, let me give you an example of what happened with Ludacris. Ludacris is a rapper. He got some girl pregnant, and she thought she was gonna cha-ching, cha-ching, take him
Oh,
to the cleaners with his money because he was making all this money. But what he ended up doing is taking her to court for custody of the child.
yes.
And so he ended up getting custody of his own child. And then he told them he's got his mother there helping out and this and that and the other. And so he didn't have to pay any child support to this girl. So he
Yes.
stepped up to the plate, took his own
Oh,
child,
wow.
and saved his own money because she was just there for the
Facts.
money. See?
Yes, 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, from my observation, it's always about the money, and that's unfortunate, especially when a life is being created. Like, nah, you that's a loving environment. It should be the first environment that they experience, like, true love
Hmm.
from my perspective, right? And yeah, that's jacked up when you do it for the wrong motivation.
It is. And I think for too long in the history of the world, as it were, we can just might as well just put everybody in there, is that because the woman is the one that gets pregnant, she's the one that gets stuck with the child. And that's the reason why men throughout history have had a bad reputation for abandoning the family because they could
Right.
just say, that's not my
Walk
child.
away.
Right. And I mean, this is pre-DNA days. I mean, now you can get a DNA test for what, 50
Right.
bucks if you go to 23andMe. I mean, because when you think about it, before to get a DNA test, you had to go to the doctor to get that done, which is probably
Yes.
definitely a definite expense. And not only that,
Mhm.
but unless you're gonna go on the Jerry Springer show, you know, and I don't think he's gonna be accepting everybody to come in there. But if you want to go to
Listen,
if you want to go to get a DNA kit, you can find out if that's your father, mother, or not, right?
this is true.
And so things have changed with technology, you know.
They
But
have.
the woman has gotten she's got the responsibility throughout the years to get stuck with the
Mhm.
child.
Yep.
Question for you.
Yes.
Given all the things we've talked about, why do you think your husband has no problem parenting the child?
Wow. A couple of things come to my mind, and that's just again from my experience being married to him. So if I draw on that real life experience and I observe or recall the things that he has said since he's had our daughter, one motivation or rationale that he may feel for parenting her is it saves him from child support. Another reason, and I've observed this with the other two children and their mothers, is um, spite. So I feel like because the majority of her memories, especially the good ones, because I get Google flashbacks all the time, which I absolutely love and adore. Before they used to make me so sad, now I love them to death. Um, but yeah, out of spite for me because I've always been a very hands-on parent and pretty much spent 98% of the time raising her. So now to not have her, he knows that is a sting, that's something he has over me. But those would probably be the two primary ones, to try to perceive that he can do something that I can't do maybe. Um, but that's not true. Everyone who knows the situation intimately, they already know how that works. So, and if I had to be honest, I really can't explain the mind of someone I perceive to be narcissistic. I've read it on paper, I know what it means, but I don't really know the thought process. And I don't know if there's a spectrum of narcissism, right? So I know there's a lot of undercurrents there as to why he may feel he can parent her either alone or better than me.
But think about it like this too, Ivy. Your daughter's 13 years old. When I was 11 years old, I was babysitting other kids. Or somebody would just say, hey, look, I'm going to the grocery store. Can you sit with my 5-year-old so they ain't got to be by themselves, right? So at
Yes,
13 years old, he ain't got to do a whole bunch of parenting anyway. He ain't got to do,
exactly.
he doesn't have to change diapers. He doesn't have to feed and clothe and all that kind of stuff, right? Like dress her
Right.
and everything. So do you think that it's easy at that age? She's probably doing chores, you know?
Oh, absolutely. She's doing chores and she's able, yes, pretty much she's able to take care of herself outside of needing a roof over her head and some place to sleep and stay. Like she's 16 now, so she could be driving and she could be working as well. Had a job since I was like about 14. I was responsible student, so my principal signed off on a work permit, so she had aspirations of doing all those things. Why they're not happening, I don't know, because none of those things would prevent her from her service to Jehovah. So, you're definitely right. She's super easy to take care of right now. She's always been that way. She's never been a problematic or a hard to deal with child. Like, she's like the best kid, and not just because she's my child, but like she was so good. I was shocked for my first child, like, really? I was like, Jehovah, not realizing it was just, genetics and a bunch of other DNA scientific stuff.
Right. Well, as you can see, she got with the program. Because I remember when you were telling me before about how you indoctrinated her into the Jehovah's Witness faith and how she soaked everything up.
She
If
was,
I, I remember you told me, you said, if I leave Jehovah or if I leave the religion, then you keep serving. You keep going. You ignore mommy.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
follow me out the door. You know?
that's right. That's
So
right.
she took
My
good
my
note.
mother, yeah, my mother did that same exercise with me and my sister when we were younger. And so, yeah, I did that same exercise with her.
Okay,
So
so
that's,
you're passing something down that you learned. What about your mother? Does she have a relationship with your mother? Because I know your mother still goes to the Kingdom Hall, right?
she does. The last time I checked, she does have a relationship with my mom. So, I'm happy for that, but at the same time that was a point of anger because I'm like my mom knows my entire life. She knew intimately the marriage and I was expecting and hoping that she would advocate for me with my daughter to be like, you need to call your mom. Like, no, you need to text your mom back. Like, yeah, I know she may be wrong, but that's your mother. And another reason why I felt like my mom would do that is because she too was left raising four daughters and had gone through a disfellowshipped husband and then her getting disfellowshipped. So she knows intimately what it was like to be in my shoes, you know? So I really thought I would have some measure of support and got nothing.
But you know what, Rita? And I hate to hear that this is happening to you, but in my own personal experience, I know people that didn't get this fellowship. They left, did a lot of things in the world. And when they came back, they didn't have empathy for anybody. I mean,
Oh,
if you so much as went on the fringes and went like you said in the last video, they read the first Friday, she was gonna cut you up, right? I'm just saying. So it's like sometimes people that's been there, done that, and walked in your shoes, sometimes they're the least ones to have any empathy because all they know is no one said nothing to me, nobody helped me back, and I'm not doing that for you. So a lot of times, people don't always look at somebody else and say, or like kind of look at themselves and say, well, I was in that situation. So I'm gonna give or feel a little bit better about somebody else, and I'm not gonna judge so
yeah.
harshly. That doesn't always happen.
Well, I can testify to that it did not happen in my case, not with my mom, and in my opinion, not even with my best friend of 20 years.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it is what it is, right? These are things you accept and you move on. You establish
exactly.
the learned lesson, you pick, you keep going and you determine what type of person do you want to be as a result of that situation. And that's
Yeah,
pretty much what I've had to do because all these situations are a buildup, right? So that's what I learned from my therapist that anger is a secondary emotion. Because they was like, "How are you feeling?" Angry. He's like, "No, no, 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 no. That's a secondary emotion. How are you feeling? Like, think about it." And as I went through the layers of like situation with my daughter, my mom, my best friend, it was a lot of abandonment and frustration and betrayal that was leading that has stacked up to those that feeling of rage, anger, you know? And
Hmm.
before I could get healed or in the process of healing, you have to then work in reverse, overcome the anger, overcome the disappointment, overcome the feelings of abandonment. Like, and think about it, these feelings are reoccurring feelings throughout a person's life. So
Exactly.
you're unpacking your entire life as you move through each phase of trying to mentally and psychologically heal. So it's possible. It's sad when you don't get the empathy that you feel like you're deserving of, right? Especially if you're an empath. I think you might have asked me that on one of the previous episodes or just when we was hanging out, right? So it's yeah, for a person that's empathetic or an empath and they come to the world with all their emotions out, it's exhausting.
It is.
It's
Let me ask you a
exhausting.
question. Given your knowledge and what you're going through right now, is there anything that you would have done differently, knowing how Jehovah's Witnesses view people who leave the organization? What would you have done differently in a means to, have a different type of a relationship with your daughter? Or do you think there would have been a difference?
There definitely would have been a difference. I tried to do the things that I felt my mother or the average woman that I had been most intimately in contact with didn't do, which was afford their child the opportunity to have a relationship with their father. So that mindset I took on naturally because that's my life experience. And then I also took on the mindset of being forgiving, turning the other cheek, right? Putting other people's interests first. And then I'm thinking about the child. So I'm thinking, okay, what is in the best interest of my daughter? To see me frustrated and enraged and, always bickering, fighting with her father. Well, no, she should be able to visit him and see him. Me knowing that he's manipulative, right? But I'm thinking he does that with women. I never would fathom that that's something that he would do to his own child. So hindsight is that I would not second guess my intuition. I would be a fierce lion to protect my daughter from any perceived, made up, imaginary, far-fetched dangers. And I would also realize that I didn't have to absorb the transgressions of the women in my past life when it came to whether or not they let their kids see their father. Everybody made the best decision that they could make, at that time. And some of those reasons were legitimate, right? Because the father ended up not being a father and he did damage to the child. So it's a very delicate situation. But yeah, there those things I would definitely do differently.
And what about in terms of the religion? Do you think that there would be things that you would have done differently when it came to how you were perceived by the organization or what she could see that you were being perceived by? How would that do you think that would have made a difference?
I don't know if that would have made a difference or not. And here's the reason why. I was a child or a teenager of two disfellowship parents. And to my memory, I can only recall one of them sitting me down to give me advance notice of their disfellowshipping, which I felt was actually a really considerate thing. And we were actually talking about why the disfellowshipping was happening, of course, to the degree of me being a minor. So I in turn did that same thing with my daughter. I explained to her what I was going through emotionally. I used illustrations that she can understand at that time for being like 11, No, yeah, she had to be 11 or 12, something like that. Anyway, so she knew what was about to happen. I asked her questions on how she felt about what was about to happen. I was like, "What do you think is?" Because we literally covered the gambit. Like, people may not want to come over the house anymore. Your friends may not be allowed to come spend the night. Like, we went through an array of examples of how my disfellowshipping might affect her social life, things like that. And I told her no matter what, I will always be supportive of her decisions. Um, so I didn't think the religious factor would come into place with her decisioning, and it was kind of a shocker because I've always told her or taught her how to study as well. So in the beginning, I would send her clips from different watchtowers on the online library. There's only like one or two, but they were saying that you're still supposed to be obedient to your parents and this and that. And you're still supposed to honor them, and that in these cases, of course, it's the case of the parent living inside the house, but still, you're supposed to have a relationship with them. And it was like it was like she batted it all like like whatever. And so I don't know when it became a factor, to be quite honest. I don't know, that was just, I don't know if that was a part of the manipulation. I don't know if it was a part of the propaganda she was listening to or any, assemblies or conventions. It could have been. I can't deny it. It's plausible.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a loaded. That you said a lot. You unpacked a lot there, and I mean, really and truly, this is the workings of a cult because that's where she got it from. I mean, I remember growing up as a child, my mother never inculcated Watchtower in me. She never
Mm,
sat me down and said, "You're doing this, and Jehovah is not going to um, love you," or she never said that. You're going to fall out of Jehovah's favor if you don't go to the meetings, and you're not gonna. She
mm,
didn't say any of that stuff. Now she
wow.
made me go to the meetings, and she told me no birthdays, no holidays, and things like that.
Yeah.
But the thing that she did, she took me to the Kingdom Hall, and
To the Kingdom Hall.
I was listening to what they were saying from the platform. She didn't reinforce any of that stuff.
Wow.
She didn't reinforce any Watchtower stuff to me. I went to the Kingdom Hall and learned that the end was coming, and so I wouldn't need to go to school. My mother never told me not to go to college. Never. She never told me.
Mm,
We were trying to figure out what I was going to do when I graduated because
mhm.
we didn't know what to do because long term, the witnesses couldn't see anything over 5 years. Going to school was
Wow.
4 years. So mom never said you can't go to school. She never said that you can't, you're going to die at Armageddon. She never said that. But she took me to the Kingdom Hall and they said all of that stuff. So that's the
Mm,
same thing that your daughter's dealing with.
this is so true.
I mean, you
I
would be
I know that.
surprised. Yeah.
I know that. I'm like, yeah.
I mean,
And like you said earlier, the people that I thought would at least be in my corner to help her understand my thinking of the matter and not just be solely fixed on the action or the perceived action of being disfellowshipped, it didn't happen.
that's
And
right.
that's one of the things that therapy also taught me. Like, you cannot expect anything that's not rational to expect anything from anyone because no
Mhm.
one has to comply with anything. And that
That's
was a
right.
hard thing to wrap around my mind. Like, you're not even obligated to act this way in this moment. Like, you can make active choices in the moment. And I was
Right.
like, I can have that type of control over my thinking. That's a superpower. I'm like,
I mean,
oh,
it's amazing because, like I had people to say, um, what should I do? We will get emails from people and they'll say, my husband is still an active witness, or my mother and my father, and should I let my child go visit my parents and allow them to go to the Kingdom Hall? And the experience I just gave you about myself is what I
Mhm.
told them about how you got to be careful because kids soak up information like a sponge. I mean, you you don't have to say stuff to them at home. They're at the meeting where you're telling them they should be. Like I said, my mom said I should be at the meeting, but she never came back and reinforced it. So I'm at the meeting because she said I got to be there. But my little mind is saying, because she wants me there, then they had a captive audience with me. And at that
Okay.
point, if you allow your children to go to the Kingdom Hall with your parents or anybody else for that matter, they're soaking in the information. Simple as that. You know.
I
So Miss
know.
Ivy,
I know.
you got any final comments that you want to say about this parental alienation, and what people, what couple of takeaways would you like people to take away from this discussion?
I would definitely say that if you're not already in therapy for it, to please go to therapy if you can. If you don't have the resources for therapy, look in your city or county to see if they have any quick hits therapies, support groups, because you need to be able to understand that the range of emotions that you're going through are not unique to you, and you need to learn from people maybe who are actively going through that situation or who have overcome the situation. So therapy, yes, and then learning to love yourself again and not hold guilt for maybe what you didn't do or how your maybe disfellowship stayed or if you walked away, like how that is contributing. Obviously, you needed to do those things to be free, to think for yourself. So now you can think about not being guilty for doing what you needed to do. You didn't plan on this happening. You would not have predicted this outcome, as a result of the situation. So learn to love yourself in addition to that, and then laugh. Learn to laugh more. Stop taking life so seriously. We're not dying, in the moment in terms of whether or not we are going to incur, the creator's wrath or have to get through this catastrophic life event with burning buildings, So just laugh and live in the moment. That's all we have are the moments.
That is so true. And not only that, but you can also keep a positive outlook, because as your daughter begins to, grow her wings and maybe even leave home, she may find herself in different, like experiences of her own,
Yeah.
where she may end up in a situation where she may find herself disfellowship. I'm not trying to say that that's going to I'm not saying that disfellowshipping is what we want to happen to her, because we know that we don't
Yeah.
want that to happen to anybody in that kind of a situation. But what I'm
Just
saying
talking
is,
about similar situations that
yeah, I
she
mean,
can understand or identify with.
absolutely. I mean, when you think about your daughter and when she starts to have her own life experiences, and something may happen to her that jolts
Mm.
her to her senses, to say, oh my God, I made a mistake. And let me go
Yeah.
back and revisit what happened with my mom, or what mistake she could have made, and how it,
Yeah.
drove a wedge between our relationship. And do
Yeah.
you know that that's how a lot of people wake up, is they have their own experience. And then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I cut my mom off or my dad off for this period of time.
I
Because
know.
your mind is so entrapped and engulfed in the thinking of this religion or these rules, that you
Yeah.
can't see nothing else.
You're stuck on a loop.
That's right.
Literally, it just goes round and round and round, just stuck on a loop.
Yeah. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion that we had about parental alienation. And we spoke about it in terms of what happens when you belong to a high control group. But this can happen to anyone. I mean, anyone can find themselves in a situation where they're being alienated by their child because the other spouse is feeding them some propaganda, whether it's religious or anything else. So, anyway, we would love to hear your feedback about what we discussed in this episode. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and leave your comments below, because we would love to hear your feedback. This has been Lady C, and Miss Ivy, I want to thank you for being on the program.
Thanks again for having me. Later, y'all.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to Hidden Struggles with your host, Lady C. This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers, online at hiddenstruggle.com. Feel free to send an email to info@hiddenstruggle.com, and we'll catch you next time on Hidden Struggles. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Critical Thinkers.